The sounds of footsteps echoed through Boston's Back Bay station, but for Brennan Ashford, they were just background noise. The cold air nipped at his skin, but he didn't feel it. He was focused on one thing, the urgent meeting he was late for. His life of wealth, fast cars, and high-stakes business had trained him to ignore almost everything around him. But today, something stopped him. It wasn't the usual sight, someone asking for money, begging on the cold tile floor. It wasn't that. But something was different about this moment. Near the entrance to the subway, a woman was sitting with her arms tightly around a little girl who looked no older than 6. The girl was curled up in her arms, wearing a coat way too big for her. The woman's face was tired, worn out. The kind of tired that comes from carrying a heavy weight for too long. Next to them was a piece of cardboard with shaky writing. Single mother. Lost our home. Anything helps. God bless you. Brennan stopped in his tracks. Usually, he'd keep walking. People like this were everywhere in Boston. But something about this woman and child stopped him. His assistant, following behind him, almost ran into him. She quickly stopped. Mr. Ashford, the board is waiting. We have exactly 9 minutes to. Brennan didn't hear her. His eyes were on the woman and the child. There was no begging in her eyes. No act. Just pure exhaustion. Something stirred inside him. His father's voice echoed in his head, telling him that people like this would take whatever you gave them and never be satisfied. But this didn't feel the same. This woman wasn't asking for anything. She just seemed defeated. Brennan moved closer. His shoes clicked against the tile floor as he approached. The woman didn't look up until he was close. Then, when she saw him, she spoke in a tired voice. "I'm sorry, we're not bothering anyone," she said, her voice hoarse from the cold. Brennan knelt down, his expensive pants touching the dirty floor. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice soft, almost surprising him. She blinked, surprised he even cared. "Sutton. Sutton Reeves." "And your daughter?" Brennan asked. Sutton tightened her arms around the girl. "Her name's Indy. She just turned 6 last week." Brennan studied her face. There was something there. This wasn't someone born into poverty. She wasn't like the others. This woman had fallen from somewhere better, and now she was doing everything she could just to survive. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. 5 months, Sutton replied quickly. "We were staying with my sister until November, but she lost her apartment too. Now, we rotate between here and the shelter on Mass Avenue when they have space." 5 months. 5 months of living in the cold, with nothing but a subway floor for shelter, while thousands of people walked past every day. Brennan felt a tightness in his chest. His assistant cleared her throat behind him. "Mr. Ashford, we really must." Brennan raised a hand, silencing her without breaking his gaze from Sutton. He heard his father's voice again, warning him about people like her. But something in Brennan's gut told him this wasn't the same. She wasn't like the others. Brennan pulled out his wallet, but then he paused. Instead of pulling out a few bills like usual, he pulled out a sleek, black credit card with platinum edges. No spending limit. No restrictions. Sutton's eyes widened. She flinched, like he was holding something dangerous. I don't understand. People don't just give their credit cards to strangers. Especially not to people like me." Brennan held the card out to her, his fingers steady. "Take it," he said. "You've got 24 hours. Spend whatever you need. No questions. No conditions." Sutton's hands trembled as she reached out. Her fingers were cold, rough from the months of hardship. "Why me?" she asked quietly, her voice breaking. "Why would you trust me?" Brennan glanced at Indy, still sleeping soundly in her mother's arms. He thought of his own childhood, growing up with everything he could ever want. But this child, this little girl, had nothing but a mother who was doing everything she could to protect her. "I want to believe there's still good left in people like you," Brennan said softly. "I want to see if what my father taught me is true. Prove me right, or prove me wrong." Sutton slowly closed her hand around the card. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, as Brennan stood up to leave, he heard her whisper, "Thank you." He didn't turn around. He just walked away, his mind racing. He had no idea if Sutton would take advantage of the card, or if she would prove his worst fears true. But something inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was different. If this story moved you, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with your friends. We want to know where you're watching from and what you think of the story so far. Let us know in the comments below to help support the growth of our channel. Brennan couldn't sleep that night. The city of Boston lay below him, its lights twinkling against the dark sky, but he was restless. His penthouse felt cold and empty, no matter how high the heat was turned up. He stared out the window, his mind not on his investments or his meetings the next day. It was on Sutton. And Indy. Why had he done it? Why had he given that woman his credit card without thinking twice? She wasn't like the others. That much was clear, but still, his father's words echoed in his mind. Trust is a currency fools spend freely, son. People like them will take everything. But Brennan couldn't shake the thought of Sutton and her daughter. She had accepted the card with hesitation, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of disbelief, of doubt, that made him wonder if she even knew what to do with the money. Was she too proud to take it? Or was she afraid to? He reached for his phone, pulling up the banking app. His heart skipped when he saw the first transaction pop up. $37.84 at CVS, Downtown Crossing. His pulse quickened. He couldn't see what she bought, just the amount and the location. It was early in the morning, and nothing had happened yet. She hadn't spent anything wild, nothing extravagant. Brennan frowned. Was she being cautious? Or was she simply too afraid to use it? For hours, nothing. The clock ticked on. His mind raced. Was she out shopping, waiting for the stores to open? Or was she doing something else with the card, waiting for the perfect moment? Then, at 6:23 a.m., another notification popped up. $52.19 at Target, South Bay. Brennan clicked on the details, but all he could see was the location and the amount. No specific purchases. His heart tightened. She was spending money, but it wasn't anything luxurious. No clothes, no electronics, no jewelry, just normal things. Another notification came through. $28.63 at Dunkin' Donuts. His chest tightened again, but not with anger, more like a strange anticipation. Sutton wasn't splurging. She wasn't living it up like someone who had just been handed an unlimited credit card. No, she was buying things she needed. Things that made sense. By 8:47 a.m., Brennan couldn't wait any longer. He grabbed his coat and headed out the door, ignoring the endless calls from his assistant. He didn't care about board meetings today. He didn't care about his schedule. Something in him couldn't wait. He told his driver to stop a few blocks from the station. He needed to walk. He needed to clear his head. As he walked down the street, he saw the familiar sights of the city. The busy morning rush, people rushing to work, the sounds of cars and buses. But Brennan's thoughts were somewhere else. When he reached the entrance to the subway station, he saw her. Sutton was still sitting there, but everything had changed. Indy was awake now, sitting beside her mother in a new purple winter coat, a fur-lined hood framing her face. She was holding a new stuffed elephant, hugging it like it was the most precious thing in the world. She was coloring in a fresh coloring book, crayons still smelling like they'd just been opened. Sutton stood up as Brennan approached, and he noticed the credit card was already in her trembling hand. She looked scared, like she was going to have to give it back. "I was going to return it," she said quickly, her voice full of panic. "I promise. I just needed to get a few things. Basic things. Necessary things." Brennan smiled softly, raising his hands. "Keep it. You still have hours left." Sutton's shoulders sagged with a mixture of confusion and relief. "I don't understand," she said, her voice wavering. "Why are you doing this?" Brennan glanced down at Indy, who was now playing with her new toy. "Because you bought her a coat," he said simply. She was freezing. Sutton's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "I couldn't let her stay cold. She's my world." Brennan looked at her, his heart heavy. "What else did you buy?" he asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Sutton hesitated, then pulled out 2 crumpled receipts from her pocket. She handed them over like evidence in a trial she thought she might lose. Brennan took them, scanning the first receipt. It was a list of things for Indy: a winter coat, boots, socks, underwear, a stuffed elephant, coloring books, crayons, and medicine. Nothing for herself. Only things for her daughter. Brennan felt his chest tighten. He looked at the second receipt. Groceries, bread, peanut butter, granola bars, fruit, juice boxes. And at the bottom, something that made his breath catch. A donation to the Women's Shelter on Mass Avenue. $100. "You donated money?" Brennan asked, stunned. Sutton blushed with embarrassment. "The shelter has helped us when they could. They're always full, always running out of supplies. I thought if I had anything left, maybe I could help someone else. Even just a little." Brennan stared at the receipts, his mind spinning. He had given Sutton a card with no limits. She could have bought anything she wanted. anything. But instead, she had spent it on her daughter's necessities and a donation to help others in need. She had chosen kindness, and Brennan's world shifted in that moment. The next day, Brennan couldn't stop thinking about Sutton and Indy. The transactions he had seen weren't what he expected. There had been no wild spending sprees, no lavish purchases. Instead, Sutton had done exactly what any mother would do. She bought what her daughter needed to survive. And then there was the donation to the shelter. That hit him hard. How many people would have taken advantage of the situation? How many would have seen it as a golden opportunity to get ahead, just for a little while? But not Sutton. She hadn't bought a single thing for herself. Not one piece of clothing. No fancy food. No luxuries. She had spent it all on necessities for Indy and even shared a bit with others. Brennan hadn't expected this, and now, a part of him felt unsettled in a way he couldn't explain. The next morning, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed inside him. He hadn't slept well. Thoughts about Sutton kept him awake, turning over and over in his mind. How had she stayed so strong? What had happened to her to bring her to this point? What was her life really like? He needed to see her again. At exactly 9 a.m., Brennan arrived at the subway station. He had the driver stop a block away. As he walked to the entrance, he felt the cold air cut through his coat. But it wasn't the cold that made him shiver. There she was. Sutton was sitting in the same spot as before, but now there was a difference. Her body language was different. She wasn't hunched over, hiding from the world. She sat up straighter, more confident, like a small weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Indy was with her, sitting beside her, coloring on a piece of paper. And that's when Brennan saw it, the small smile on Sutton's face. It wasn't a big smile, but it was there. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they're beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Sutton looked up as Brennan approached. There was no panic this time. No fear. Just a quiet acknowledgement of his presence. "Good morning," she said softly, as if she had been waiting for him. Brennan knelt down in front of her. "How's she doing?" he asked, glancing at Indy, who was still absorbed in her drawing. Sutton's eyes softened as she looked at her daughter. "She's doing better. I think she finally feels safe." Brennan nodded, his heart aching. He looked at Indy again. She was so small, so innocent. And yet, she had been through more than any child should. "You've made sure she's warm, and that's the most important thing," Brennan said quietly. Sutton smiled a little, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "I've made sure she's okay, but I haven't been okay for a long time." Brennan was about to speak when Sutton reached into her pocket and pulled out the credit card. She handed it to him, her fingers trembling slightly. "I was going to give it back to you," she said, her voice breaking. "But I don't know what to do with it anymore. You've already done enough. More than enough." Brennan didn't take the card. Instead, he gently placed his hand over hers, stopping her from giving it back. "Keep it," he said firmly. "You still have time left. You don't need to give it back to me." Sutton's face was full of confusion. "Why are you being so kind to us? What do you want from us?" Brennan didn't answer right away. He had never been asked that before. No one had ever questioned his actions so directly. In his world, kindness had always come with strings attached, with expectations. But Sutton wasn't like anyone else. "I don't want anything from you," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I just want to see you and Indy have a chance to live without worrying about the next meal, without wondering where you're going to sleep at night." Sutton's lips trembled, and Brennan could see the tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I don't know how to repay you for everything you've done," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You don't have to repay me," Brennan replied. "You've already given me something I didn't even know I was missing." Sutton looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if looking for some kind of explanation. Brennan stood up and stepped back, his mind still racing. He had come here wanting to help them, but now he realized it was more than that. Sutton and Indy had given him something more than he could ever repay. "Get some rest," Brennan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Take care of Indy, and when you're ready, we'll figure out what comes next." Sutton's eyes filled with tears again, but this time, it was different. She wasn't just grateful. She was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better, that there was still a chance for her and Indy to rebuild their lives. As Brennan turned to leave, he paused for a moment. He glanced over his shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, he smiled. It wasn't the cold, practiced smile he used in the boardroom. It was a genuine, human smile, a smile that said maybe, just maybe, there was still hope for the world. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. We want to hear from you. Let us know where you're watching from and what you think about the story. Your comments help our channel grow. The next few days felt like a blur to Brennan. His life, which had always been driven by logic, numbers, and strategies, suddenly felt out of control. He couldn't stop thinking about Sutton and Indy. Every time he glanced at his phone, his mind went back to the last time he saw them. Sutton's eyes full of doubt and gratitude, and Indy's innocent smile as she colored in her new book. There was something about them that had shaken him in a way he hadn't expected. He had given them a chance, a way out of the cold, and in return, Sutton had done something remarkable. She had chosen to be selfless, even when she had every reason not to be. But Brennan couldn't stop wondering, what would they do next? Where would they go from here? Could he help them, or had he already done enough? He couldn't let go of the feeling that Sutton still needed something more than just the credit card, something that couldn't be bought with money. The following morning, Brennan made up his mind. He didn't wait for his assistant or any business calls. He walked out of his penthouse, determined to do something that had nothing to do with business or wealth. He drove straight to the women's shelter Sutton had mentioned. It was a small, modest building tucked away in a less-than-perfect part of the city. The outside looked worn, like it had seen better days, but the people who worked there seemed like they were doing everything they could to make the place a haven for women in need. Brennan didn't know what to expect. He just knew he needed to do something. The idea of just handing out money felt insufficient. He wanted to offer them more than that. Something real. Something sustainable. The receptionist looked at him with skepticism when he entered. She was used to people coming in with donations, but no one like Brennan. He didn't belong in places like this. But when she saw his determined expression, she didn't ask questions. "I'm looking to help," Brennan said, his voice firm but soft. "I want to make sure that the women who come here get the help they need. Not just today, but long term." The receptionist gave him a wary look. "We don't get many people like you around here." Brennan nodded. "I know, but that's going to change. I want to set up a program. Something that can help these women rebuild. Housing, jobs, education, real opportunities. And I don't want it to be a charity. I want to create a pathway out for them." The receptionist blinked, a little taken aback. "You're serious?" "I am," Brennan said. "I want to use my resources to open doors. Not just for one or two people, but for anyone who needs it." The woman stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll call someone. We can start the conversation." Brennan smiled, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He didn't know if this would work, but he knew he had to try. Hours later, Brennan found himself back at the subway station. It wasn't planned, but somehow, it felt right to be there again. He wasn't sure why, but he felt drawn to this place, to the people who lived in its shadows. When he arrived, he found Sutton and Indy sitting in the same spot as before. This time, Indy was playing with a new toy, one Brennan had bought for her. But what caught his attention the most was Sutton. She wasn't just sitting there, waiting. She was looking through a set of papers, scribbling something down on a notebook with the kind of focus that told Brennan she was working on something important. When she saw him, she stood up, the notebook still in her hands. "You're back," she said softly, a little surprised. "I am," Brennan said with a nod. He hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "I've been thinking. You and Indy need more than just a handout. You need something permanent. I want to help you both get back on your feet." Sutton blinked, clearly taken aback. "What do you mean?" "I've been working with the shelter," Brennan continued. "I'm setting up a program that will help women like you find housing, get jobs, and get the education they need. It's not charity, Sutton. It's a way for you to rebuild, to live with dignity." Sutton looked at him, her face a mixture of disbelief and awe. "You're serious?" "I am," Brennan replied. "I want to help you and Indy find a real future. Not just for today, but for tomorrow. A future that's yours." Sutton's eyes filled with tears. She didn't speak at first. She just looked at Brennan, as if trying to figure out if he was real. "I can't believe this," she whispered. "I've been so scared, just trying to survive. I never thought I'd be able to do more than that. But now, you're offering me a chance." Brennan nodded, a soft smile crossing his face. "You've already done more than you know, Sutton. You've shown me that kindness is possible, even when you've lost everything." Indy looked up from her toy, her big brown eyes curious. "Are we going to a new house, Mommy?" Sutton smiled at her daughter, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, sweetie. We're going to have a real home." Brennan turned away, feeling a lump in his throat. He had come here to offer them a chance. But in the process, they had given him something too. They had shown him that people could change, that there was still good in the world, even when everything else seemed to say otherwise. A week passed, and things began to change. Sutton and Indy had settled into a temporary apartment that Brennan had arranged for them through the new program. It wasn't much, 2 small rooms in a modest building, but it was warm, safe, and most importantly, it was theirs. They had their own space, a place where Indy could sleep in a real bed for the first time in months. Sutton had started to relax. She still had a long way to go, but each day felt like a small victory. The fear and exhaustion that had once consumed her were slowly fading, replaced by something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She'd signed up for job training and was starting to make plans for her future. She was still uncertain, still unsure of how everything would work out, but for the first time in a while, she felt like there was a way forward. And Indy, bright-eyed and excited, was adjusting to school, making new friends, and living a life that was so different from the one they had known on the streets. Brennan visited them often, though not as a benefactor. He wasn't there to check on his investment. He was there because he cared. He brought coffee, pastries, and sometimes just sat and talked with Sutton, not about business or wealth, but about life, about how they were doing, how Indy was adjusting. The visits had become routine, and Brennan found himself looking forward to them. He'd never been a man who made connections easily, but something about Sutton and Indy made him feel human. He could feel the walls he had built around himself slowly coming down. One evening, after dinner, Sutton sat down on the couch with a cup of tea, her eyes tired but peaceful. She had a calmness about her now, a quiet strength that had grown in the last few weeks. It was as if she was finally starting to believe in herself again. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything you've done for us. I know I can't ever repay you, but I want you to know how much it means to me, to us." Brennan smiled, leaning against the doorframe. "You don't have to repay me," he said gently. "You've already done more than enough. You've reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that there's still goodness in people, even when it feels like everything's falling apart." Sutton looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "I didn't think I'd ever feel safe again. I didn't think I'd ever have a future. But you gave us that. You gave me a chance to be more than just a survivor, to actually live." Brennan's heart tightened. He hadn't expected to hear those words. He hadn't expected to become so important to someone who had so little. But he had, and somehow, it made everything else seem insignificant. "Is this real?" Sutton asked, her voice breaking slightly. "Are we really going to be okay?" Brennan walked into the room, sitting down beside her. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached over and took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You're already doing it," he said quietly. "You're already building a life. A real one." Just then, Indy came running into the room, her face lit up with excitement. "Mom, I made something for you," she exclaimed, holding up a crumpled piece of paper with a drawing of a butterfly on it. Sutton smiled, taking the drawing from Indy and holding it to her chest. "It's beautiful, baby," she said, her voice full of love. "Thank you." Brennan watched the scene unfold, a lump in his throat. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself, something real. The next few weeks passed in a blur of small victories. Sutton continued her job training, and Indy thrived in school. Brennan kept his promises, checking in on them regularly, ensuring they had what they needed. But this time, it wasn't about charity. It wasn't about fixing someone else's problems. It was about giving them a chance to build something of their own. One day, as Brennan arrived at the apartment for his usual visit, Sutton was waiting for him at the door with a wide smile on her face. "Guess what?" she asked, her voice full of excitement. Brennan raised an eyebrow, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "What? I got the job," she said, practically bouncing with joy. "It's a full-time position at a local clinic. I start next week." Brennan felt a rush of pride for her, something he hadn't expected. "That's amazing, Sutton. I'm so proud of you." Sutton's eyes sparkled with a mix of relief and joy. "I never thought I'd be here," she said, her voice softening. "But you gave me the chance to get here." Brennan's smile widened. "You did the hard part. You fought for it. You earned it." Indy came running up to him, her arms wide for a hug. "Look, Mr. Brennan, look what I made." She handed him a drawing of a house, with her and her mom standing in front, holding hands. Brennan crouched down, taking the picture from her hands. That's beautiful, Indy. You're an artist. Indy beamed at him. It's our new house, she said excitedly. Mommy says we're going to stay here forever. Brennan's heart swelled as he stood up. He looked at Sutton, and for the first time in his life, he saw something that he had never noticed before: a family, not bound by blood, but by love and perseverance. You're going to be okay, Brennan said quietly. You both are. If this story moved you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. We want to know where you're watching from and what you think about the story. Your comments help us grow and bring more stories like this to you. It had been a few months since Brennan had helped Sutton and Indy, and things were looking up. The apartment was now home for them, filled with laughter and the warmth of a new beginning. Sutton had settled into her job at the clinic, and Indy had adjusted well to school. Brennan still visited them regularly, not because he felt obligated, but because he genuinely enjoyed their company. Something about them, about their resilience and love for each other, had shifted something inside him. He had spent so much of his life building an empire, acquiring wealth, and guarding his heart. But in these past few months, he had learned what it really meant to live. He was no longer just a businessman. He was becoming someone who understood what it meant to care for others, to give without expecting anything in return. Sutton and Indy had shown him that. They had opened his eyes to what truly mattered. One afternoon, Brennan sat in the small but cozy living room with Sutton and Indy, sipping coffee and chatting about the day. The walls were lined with new pictures, Indy's colorful drawings that brightened up the space. Sutton was smiling more these days, her face no longer weighed down by the exhaustion that had once seemed permanent. Guess what? Sutton said, looking at Brennan with a twinkle in her eye. Brennan raised an eyebrow, curious. What? I've been offered a promotion at the clinic, she said, her voice filled with excitement. They want me to help manage the intake process. It's more responsibility, but it's something I've worked for. Brennan's eyes lit up. That's fantastic, Sutton. I knew you could do it. She smiled, her confidence growing. I never thought I'd get this far. It feels like a dream come true. But it's not just the job. It's everything. I've got a future now. I've got a place to live, a job that pays, and Indy's got a school to go to. We're really starting over, and it feels good. Brennan leaned back in his chair, feeling a wave of pride wash over him. He had played a part in this transformation, but it was Sutton's hard work, determination, and love for her daughter that had brought them here. He had just given them a chance. You've worked hard for this, Brennan said, his voice full of sincerity. You deserve it. Sutton nodded, her expression softening. I couldn't have done it without you. You gave us that chance when I didn't think I had won. Brennan's heart ached slightly at her words. He hadn't expected this kind of gratitude. He had just wanted to help, but he had never imagined how much it would change him too. As he looked over at Indy, who was busy drawing at the table, Brennan realized something. This wasn't just about charity. This was about creating lasting change. About showing that even in the darkest moments, there was always a way out. Sutton and Indy had shown him that, and now they were starting a new chapter, one that was full of possibility. Indy looked up from her drawing, her big brown eyes sparkling. Mr. Brennan, guess what I made, she said, holding up a drawing of a sun shining brightly in the sky, with flowers and butterflies surrounding it. That's beautiful, Indy, Brennan said, smiling warmly. What's it called? It's called The Best Day Ever, Indy said proudly. Brennan chuckled, his heart swelling. Well, I think it's perfect. You really know how to capture the best moments. Indy beamed at him, clearly proud of her creation. Sutton smiled too, her eyes full of love and gratitude for her daughter. Sutton stood up, wiping a tear from her eye. You've given us so much, Brennan. I don't know how to thank you enough. You don't have to thank me, Brennan replied, his voice quiet but full of meaning. You've already done more than I could ever repay. Sutton's eyes softened, and for the first time, she truly believed it. She believed in the future, in the new life she and Indy were building. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was theirs. Brennan stood up to leave, but before he did, Sutton grabbed his hand, her grip firm and warm. You've changed everything for us. You've given us more than we ever thought we could have, and for that, we'll always be grateful. Brennan smiled, feeling something inside him shift. You've changed me too, Sutton, he said softly. You reminded me of what really matters. As Brennan stepped out the door and into the cold, his heart felt lighter than it had in years. He hadn't just helped Sutton and Indy. They had helped him too. They had shown him that life wasn't about the things you owned, but the people you care about and the impact you have on them. For the first time in a long time, Brennan felt at peace. He had done something that truly mattered, and that was worth more than all the wealth in the world. Brennan couldn't believe how far they had come. A few months ago, Sutton and Indy had nothing. They were just another statistic, another face in the crowd, struggling to survive in a world that often overlooked them. But now, they had a home, a future, and a sense of purpose that had been missing for so long. As the weeks went by, things continued to improve. Sutton's job at the clinic had turned into a permanent position, and she was thriving. Her confidence grew with each passing day, and her determination to build a better life for Indy never wavered. She had become a symbol of strength, not just for her daughter, but for herself as well. Indy, too, had blossomed. She was doing well in school, making friends, and finding joy in the little things again. Things that every child should experience, but that many never get the chance to. She no longer had to fear what tomorrow might bring. She could be a child, free to dream and play. And Brennan? He was no longer the man who only saw the world through the lens of wealth and business. He had learned the true value of connection, of giving without expecting anything in return. Sutton and Indy had shown him what it meant to be truly human, to care for others without strings attached. They had given him a gift, one he would never be able to repay. Sitting across from Sutton in their cozy apartment one evening, Brennan reflected on everything that had happened. The change in her, the change in him, the transformation in their lives. It was all so much more than he had expected when he first gave Sutton that credit card. "You did it," Brennan said softly, looking at Sutton. "You've built a life. You've rebuilt everything from scratch." Sutton smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "We've rebuilt, Brennan, and I couldn't have done it without you." There was no grand gesture now, no moment of dramatic revelation, just quiet understanding. They both knew the journey was far from over, but they had come so far, and for the first time, they both felt hopeful for the future. Indy came running into the room, her arms outstretched as she ran toward Brennan. "Look, Mr. Brennan," she said excitedly, holding up a drawing of a butterfly, this time with bright colors and a big, happy sun shining down on it. "That's beautiful, Indy," Brennan said, crouching down to her level. "What's it called?" Indy grinned. "It's called The New Beginning." Brennan's heart swelled with emotion. This child had been through so much, and yet she still believed in the possibility of something better. She believed in new beginnings, just like her mother. Sutton sat beside Brennan, watching the exchange. "It feels like a new beginning for all of us," she said quietly, her voice full of emotion. "We've made it through the darkest times, and now we're building something real." Brennan nodded. "You've built something beautiful, something that will last." As the evening wore on, Brennan found himself thinking about the lessons he had learned from this journey. He had started out giving, but now he realized that he had received far more than he ever could have imagined. The lesson was clear. Life wasn't about how much you had or how many deals you closed. It was about the people you helped, the relationships you built, and the love you gave. Brennan had learned that when you open your heart to others, you open yourself up to the possibility of real change. Sutton had taught him what it meant to fight for something better, to never give up, no matter how difficult the road may seem. And Indy, with her innocent optimism and unwavering hope, had reminded him that even in the toughest times, there is always room for joy. As he stood up to leave, Brennan turned to Sutton and Indy. "You've made it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've shown me what it really means to live, and I'll always be here if you need me. But I believe in you. You've got everything you need to succeed." Sutton smiled, her eyes filled with gratitude. "We've got everything we need now, because we have each other." Brennan smiled, his heart full. He had given them a chance, but they had given him something far more valuable, the reminder that hope and love could still change the world. As he left the apartment, the sound of Indy's laughter and Sutton's voice echoed in his mind. He knew that this was just the beginning for them. They had found something real, and in doing so, they had shown Brennan that a new life was possible for anyone who was willing to fight for it. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Let us know where you're watching from and what you think about the story. Your comments help us grow and bring more stories like this to you.